Hello everybody and welcome to the Daily Splat. Today's video number 13 in our series of 20 reviewing the English Premier League season. Today we are talking Queen's Park Rangers, or QPR, newly promoted to the Premier League after winning the Championship the previous season in 2011, although they didn't find out they'd won it until the final day of the season when it was announced that they wouldn't be deducted points for dodgily signing Andrea Fowlin. QPR started promptly with a 4-0 loss to Bolton Wanderers. It was a bit of a pantsing. Clint Hill was sent off on that day as well for a needless headbutt with about 10 seconds remaining of the game. All in all, it was a bit of a shocking start from Neil Warnock's men. And, you know, QPR and Bolton, interestingly, they would clash interestingly again in the season, and of course would be competing to stay up, it would turn out. It didn't look like that at the start of the season. Bolton flying, QPR getting a bit of a trouncing. In fact, QPR getting trounced was something that would happen a fair bit. Unfortunately, they lost 6-0 to Fulham, which was certainly not a very good result for the Super Hoops, or the not so Super Hoops, or the R's, whatever they're called. And they were also beaten. You know, they tended just to get beat quite a lot, to be honest. However, they did pull off a couple of surprising results towards the end of the season, which ultimately kept them up. Wins over Arsenal 2-1 and Liverpool 3-2, and of course Chelsea 1-0 in the early part of the season, did actually see QPR manage to achieve staying up. They ended up staying up on the final day, despite losing to Manchester City 3-2 with a last-minute goal. It could well have seen them relegated, but fortunately for them, Bolton were held to a 2-2 draw at Stoke, meaning that it was Bolton that went down and QPR that just stayed up. Now, a lot of stuff happened between the start of the season and the end. Tony Fernandes took over as owner from Flavio Briatore, and that was a good move. Joey Barton came in from Newcastle, and that was an interesting move. Certainly he put in some cracking performances for Rangers and helped keep them up. At the same time, he was Joey Barton, and indeed his actions on the last day of the season, getting sent off and managing to get himself a 12-game ban for the start of next season. Yeah, not great. He has been stripped of the captaincy, but they are keeping him at the club because he is actually a reasonably decent footballer at that level, you know, sort of mid to lower Premier League. Even with his thuggish behaviour, he still has a place in that team. Not sure if I agree with Mark Hughes' decision, but there you go. Mark Hughes, you say? But you said Neil Warnock a moment ago. Sadly for Neil, he was sacked halfway through the season and replaced with Mark Hughes, and whilst that decision might have been a bit surprising and indeed a bit of a role reversal for Mark Hughes considering what happened to him at Manchester City, he did come in and make an improvement. A couple of players he signed turned out to be not bad as well. Jibril Cisse came in on loan and either scored or got sent off. That's pretty much what he did, one or the other. Occasionally both. He had a positive impact. Bobby Zamora, fresh from scoring against them in that 6-0 win for Fulham over QPR, also came in, and he didn't have a brilliant second half of the season, but he certainly provided, you know, an option for them, and he put in a couple of good performances that did ultimately help QPR stay in the league. Adel Taarabt finally decided in the last 5 weeks to remember how to play after a very disappointing campaign, and he might have a future at the club. That remains to be seen. And until he suffered an injury that ended his season, Andre Fowlin, I actually thought, was kind of worth all the hassle of that illegal, dodgy signing. An overall season mark for QPR, you have to give them a C-. It's a pass mark, and it's a marginal pass mark. I sort of count these as failures, I suppose. They just stayed up. I mean, admittedly, their objective was to stay up, but they only just managed it, and to be honest, they weren't the most convincing side. However, Mark Hughes has been quick to jump into action. He's already made a couple of signings from his old mate Fergie, Sir Alex Ferguson, giving him Fabio, the young Brazilian left-back, for a year. It'll be interesting to see how he does with a season of Premier League football consistently playing, particularly in a team which, let's face it, aren't as good as Manchester United, but could possibly do a job where other players like Taiwo were so disappointing. But they've also managed to secure Park Ji-sung's signature for next season. The 31-year-old Korean midfielder signing for 3 years for £2 million, although that could rise to £5 million based on performances. and he'll be there to put the park into Queen's Park Rangers. I think he's a very clever signing. He's an industrious midfielder, he's hard-working, and he gets goals against big teams, a bit like QPR, so expect him to be hammering them in against Chelsea, Arsenal, and I'm afraid probably Manchester United as well in the coming season. I think that's a very clever signing. There's still a lot of work to be done in this QPR team. New keeper's going to be needed, not just because Paddy Kenny wasn't that good, but he's also left to join Leeds United, so they are going to need somebody to play between the sticks who's an improvement. I think they can manage to find somebody. There'll be a keeper knocking around somewhere. But yeah, even though it wasn't a brilliant season for QPR, they stayed up, and that really was the most important thing. They also got a win away at Everton 1-0, which is pretty hard to do. So they really did quite well against the big teams, but just couldn't quite do it against teams of their own level in a lot of the games. But they've stayed up, they've got a chance to rebuild, and let's see if Mark Hughes can do that and keep them up for another year. We'll have to wait and see. Okay, that's it for Queen's Park Rangers. Tomorrow we'll be reviewing Stoke City. Stoke now pretty much never present in the Premier League, right up there with the likes of United and Arsenal. We'll be reviewing their season, seeing how it all went, along with other things, looking at players. Peter Crouch and his goal of the season will certainly